everyone, and welcome to our Lightning Chat series. I'm Gianna Cosma, Product Marketing Manager at Lightspeed Systems. I recently joined Matt Jackson from Fayette County Public Schools in Georgia for a conversation about student data privacy and all the great work his team is doing. During the webinar, Matt went in depth on their entire process, and I thought what he shared was really valuable for our Lightning Chat listeners. So without further ado, have a listen. As part of our discussion today, we'll we want to learn about what Fayette's process, Matt and his team looked like before developing an app vetting process, then go into how it works today, what he requires from vendors and how he's thinking about his vendor partnerships, and then get into how Fayette County stays ahead with changing privacy policies, as well as how they build trust with parents. And finally, we'll kind of touch on how staying on top of data privacy and compliance, what that impact is on ROI. Matt, I would love for you if you could share what was your vetting process like before you had a formal app vetting system in place?
So I would say before it was definitely the wild, wild west, down here in Fayette. One of the things we would do when I was a teacher 12 years back, we would email our favorite technology person and hope that they turned it on for us, turned on that app or allowed us to use that app, because it was, we started off as a Chrome district, and we still are a Google district. But it was more just different people turning on and enabling these for us. So there was no consistency at all district wide, system in place. And, we started discovering that schools would go off on their own tangents and start purchasing applications and resources, and then look to us, where we train, but we also work on the physical technology in my department. But we didn't have enough trainers, and then we would have to go and learn the product that the school bought. So there was no consistency whatsoever across our school district. I would also add that the teachers, they're fantastic, and they find different types of applications. For example, when they go to local conference, that they'll bring back to the district with them. And a lot of times, back several years ago, we would just allow those applications, as the teachers requested them, especially if we had a group that we had, 10, 15 different teachers emailing us about it. So there wasn't, a centralized way for us to stay in touch with the data privacy part of all of this. We were newbies to it as well. Before we were just focused more on, the Microsoft, the tools and the suites or suite there. And then, the different Google tools and resources. And, there was a point where students could even go in and just pull down their own extensions and applications. The instructional alignment, of course, was missing. And a lot of times the content coordinators were not involved in what the teachers were using. So there may have been little to no alignment of the Georgia standards to what was, inside of that application or that digital resource. Because, we talk about apps, but it also applies to websites too, depending on how the student's interacting with the content. And, having the ability to track and see what is being used effectively and what effective resources are out there was really a big challenge, because it was all based on just feedback and emails. There was not a central location, where we could have those types of conversations as a district.
Right. And I know a lot of districts can resonate with that Wild West of apps experience. So in our conversations, you've shared a bit about your process now. And so would love for you to share, how does that process look today when a teacher wants to bring in a new app?
So, now what teachers have to do is we have a ticketing process whereby they submit the digital resource. And what we do is inside the questioning, when they do that submission, we ask them for a number of different, pieces of information to help us out. Uh, but before they even get to the ticketing part, we want them to have conversations at the school level, start at their grade level. Do we already have a resource in place that does this thing? Because one of the things that, big things we notice is uh, a school might be paying for two different resources that overlap or can do the same thing. So we try to help with that. Or the district's paying for a resource that the school level doesn't like, and how can we get move past that? Is there professional development that we can provide? So then once the discussion's been had at that school level, and the principal signs off on it, because any request has to go through the school principal, then our content coordinators would take a look at it and then check against any resources that they may have. And if they already have something, that would be a great opportunity to go out and do some, professional development with those teachers or those schools. So it definitely helps, being able to see being able to quantify the usage of a resource in terms of targeted professional development. These schools aren't using it. Is it because of this, or that? So those are great ways for us to get in the door and start helping with the resource, especially if it's a paid district resource that we expect the teachers to use, like a paid textbook, for example. If the new tool that the teacher, the original teacher wanted is still needed, then they would be able to submit a ticket. And we just use Incident IQ. We created a custom form where the teacher has to show where they've actually spoken with the vendor. They have to provide information about the privacy policy. They are the gatekeeper, if you will, of how old must the user of the application be in order to use the resource. Because in the end, we're concerned about just sharing all of this personally identifiable information, or PII, with hundreds of different vendors, and we don't even know where they're from, what country. They may be in a country that doesn't follow the laws of the United States, which would be any other country. So where are their servers located, for example, where our information is being stored at. So that formal request process is really important, and we take it seriously. And if they don't complete all fields, we just we'll send it right back to them and explain why, because we don't want it to just be like a punitive thing or something like a roadblock being in their way. We want them to learn, and by having them go through that privacy policy, is a way to do that, because ideally, all educators are thinking, the same way about student privacy. So our application review team, evaluates whatever the resource is using the One EdTech rubric. This is a fantastic resource that we adopted several years ago, and I believe we'll have some more information about this as we go through today. But that focuses on how vendors collect, student data, school data, teacher data, the security, of the application. When they built the application, did they build it with security in mind? Does the application require two-factor authentication? Those are different things that we have, or we see inside of the rubric. Is there advertising? One rule of thumb is this: if the resource advertises to students, we do not allow it, because we can't control what advertisements are going to pop up on the screen. And then the third party sharing, we probably all have partners who do share some information, maybe for just analytical purposes, but we also try to go to that step. And that's kind of one of our newer ventures, if you will. Now we need to go and vet, these third parties, but eventually it just, because they have third parties, and on and on and on. The One EdTech rubric, though, it's also reviewed are utilized as we review our standards alignment. We want to make sure that whatever that resource is based on Georgia standards. So a lot of times that might be a separate rubric that each individual coordinator maintains, and we work with our coordinators so they understand this process as well. What's the instructional value of the resource, and whether something similar is already in place or not, like I mentioned earlier. So once we review, the resource, it'll then go to our curriculum coordinators, and then they actually have the final decision about whether it's approved or not. So thus far, it's gone through the technical process of review, the privacy policy. It's gone through a general instructional review, and now it's in the hands of the content coordinator, and they either yay it or they nay it. And if it's approved or not approved, it's put on the Lightspeed Insight dashboard. So we're longtime partners with Lightspeed, and they have a lot of great resources that we utilize throughout this process. So if it's approved, it's marked as approved, and then we even put the grade levels there so that there's a public dashboard that we'll talk about in a couple of slides here. But the public dashboard allows teachers and students to see, and parents to see, what we have approved. If it's denied, we like to put the rationale. It was denied because we already have a resource, and here is the resource that does the exact same thing. And we can also mark it as in review, meaning that it's somewhere in the process. And beginning of the school year, it certainly takes a while. I know some school systems will only offer certain times during the school year where they do all of this. Right now, ours is ongoing through the school year, but we typically get them starting the middle of July or so. And they'll start coming in, and then we have the Georgia ETC conference coming up where a lot of teachers will attend. So we're already expecting a lot there. But sometimes we have to put a little notification on our dashboard that just says this. It might take 5 or 6 weeks before we even get to the resource. And then the final part of this approval, it's actually not the final, but one of the end steps is putting it in ClassLink. So we have the whole district uses ClassLink. Our LMS is there, and getting to their Gmail and all those things are there. But we only put the approved ones that have gone through this process, and we only roster the ones that the district is paying for. We don't roster if an individual school goes off and purchase it, just because of the manpower involved with doing that. We'll support them the best we can, but we can't take one individual school and because then we're the point of contact for service and support, and we may not even know what that resource does. So
great. That sounds like a very robust process from starting out with teachers kind of discovering and using their own apps without leadership or IT instruction even having a chance to vet that and to know about it. So looking at the vendor side, when you're evaluating a new vendor, what do you require before moving forward?
So the first thing we look at is their privacy policy. And let me talk about how we would do it for like in an individual application that a school is requesting versus how a district would do it, because it is different. So if a teacher is requesting a free application, we're going to pull the privacy policy, the terms of use, and that's where that one EdTech rubric comes in. And we utilize that rubric. We fill the entire rubric out. And the way we did that was we made a template in Google Sheets, and we're able to just go in and type in our notes, as we're going through and evaluating these privacy policies. And once you start doing it, you can do them pretty quickly. So we evaluate all the apps, with that one EdTech rubric. Nothing does not go through that rubric. Even so, then looking at what student data is collected. That's, really our, the most important point in employee data. We want to make sure that vendor is securing it. How are they securing it? Like I mentioned earlier, are they using two-factor authentication or a complex password? And then are they sharing that information? Are they selling that information? How are they making money? Either they're making money by selling it to us and we're paying for it, or they're making money off of our data somehow. There's rarely in between. I'm sure there's definitely in betweens, but I would think that would be somewhat rare. Does the vendor include, the advertisements inside of the applications? Because, we want to make sure that our students are getting um, quality, and not being, bombarded with, you need to buy this, because they can't buy all those things. And, it's kind of a waste, in my opinion, for the student side to even see advertisements. Now, if a teacher sees an advertisement, that's a little different. We're not as strict about that, but the student side, it's a no-go for sure if they see advertisements at all. If their language, within that privacy policy is vague, um, then typically we can do a couple things. We've reached directly out to the vendor, on behalf of the school. Other school districts and One Ed Tech have evaluated a lot of the applications already, and they're, conveniently located in Lightspeed, where we can see, at least how somebody else, evaluated it. We still evaluate them all ourselves, but that's good information to have that. And then if, the vendor doesn't provide us with a satisfactory answer, we'll tell them why. We're not going to use that app or that resource. So ideally, the vendor already has a One EdTech certification. That's icing on the cake right there. We still vet them, fully vet them and everything. Uh, we're a little bit more comfortable, with that whole process. But that definitely, having that One EdTech certification accelerates the review process for us, and the teacher's able to get to the resource much faster. I don't think we've ever denied an application that was already had that One EdTech certification. So it pretty closely aligns with, what we do here in Fayette County. And then approval, it's not just about the functionality of the application. Does it align with like our internal standards that we have? Does it align with the quality, of resource that we have here in Fayette County? And we've actually started, we've created, right now it's 8 pages long, so it's rather long, but we have our own privacy policy that we're now asking our vendors to sign. And we've had some signatures, so it's good. Now, to be, transparent, we're not sure what we would do if a big one said no. But we would work closely, with that vendor to see why. Because we feel it's equally as important that, they are following our contract as well, especially if it becomes a paid resource. Now, paid resources are different, because I was talking about more about the free resources, but the paid resources, when we're talking about the privacy policy of the vendor, we're definitely going to interact with them back and forth. We're going to say we need this added to the privacy policy or that added, depending on the size of the resource and the number of users. It'll even go through our legal team. And we're talking about like months, right? Like these are long-term types of approval processes. But then, of course, we would follow the same procedures, once that happens. And then a lot of times we've had the vendors change their privacy policy on their actual website. So, by us sharing and having that common, One EdTech rubric, verbiage, if you will, I think a lot of the vendors are starting to realize, especially the K-12 vendors, starting to realize that, these guys are pretty serious about security and, data privacy for students.
So we've talked about the vetting and approval process, but once an app is approved, the work doesn't necessarily stop there. So in terms of staying active, Matt, proactive. How do you stay proactive with changing privacy policies?
So, fortunately, we are able to have the Lightspeed Insights dashboard, and that's the same dashboard that our users are able to go to and see which apps are approved and whatnot. But what the Lightspeed Insights dashboard does is it sends us, the admins in the application, uh, changes in our vendor privacy policies, but then it also like highlights specific components of the privacy policy that have changed. That way we can pull up the original rubric because we keep all the rubrics in our, Google Drive. So we can pull up that original rubric and we can, cross reference it again if we needed to. Um, a lot of times the information that the Lightspeed notification gives us is sufficient to where we don't need to do that. For example, this advertiser now or this vendor now puts advertising for children. So that we would look at that, because it's also available right there on the Insights dashboard, and turn it off or make a decision about it. So who's getting the alerts. So we are able to set up different levels of administrators inside of Lightspeed, and assigning out different roles, like who is going to get these notifications and who's going to add them and edit them and do different things on that transparency dashboard, as I like to call it, because that lets parents also see what we're using here. And that it helps us to be proactive, I guess, rather than reactive. If we know pretty quickly that there's a problem or a potential problem with one of these changes, then we can quickly go in and turn off that resource, or do something different with that resource, instead of waiting for a parent who came across it while they're helping their child do their homework. So and I feel like it's pretty quick. I'm not sure how they scan the network or the internet and pull that in, but it seems to be immediate. So again, this used to be like a manual process where we would have a long list of resources, and we would have to go and did this privacy policy change last year? So now we're just looking at it from year to year versus day to day. So it's a lot easier to knock one or two out. We definitely have a pretty good solid team of, I'm going to say, 5 people, and like the core people involved in this whole process. And we've gone through a couple of different trainings, and we've experimented with these rubrics, and it took us time to get where we're at right now. So I would say maybe 3 years ago is where we started the work. But within that first year, we were able to make a lot of leeway. I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that to y'all, that it wasn't an overnight change. Um, and then let's see, I think I fully answered that question.
Yeah, and you spoke earlier, Matt, a bit about supporting the transparency of approved apps, that
Oh
transparency.
yeah.
Are teachers and staff expected to check that approved list before introducing anything new? And how does that process work?
So once the resource is, either approved or denied, or it's in the process, then we put it on our Digital Insight dashboard, so to where the teacher can just check there. They're also going to have a ticket in, but only that teacher will see that ticket. And what that does for us, the core 5 people, doing a lot of this work, what that does is it shows the teacher, all the other teachers, that it's okay, it's in the process of being reviewed. So I don't also need to put in a ticket, so we're not getting bombarded with one app, over and over and over again. So that's been really helpful, having that transparency there for the teachers. And again, if it's denied, in us putting why, and if it's approved, we have, there's a little notes area where you can say it's approved for students, 612, for example, or it's approved for this school. Maybe that school has a self-contained class where they need that resource. So we can do things like that as well. And it also allows our parents, our stakeholders, people in the community, taxpayers, to be able to look in and see what we are utilizing here in Fayette County. And that's been helpful. When we're having conversations with parents, a lot of times, I know teachers can, look at the resources and, maybe a student needs this or that, instead of, going out and doing a whole lot of research. That dashboard has helped a lot. So the notes part, I feel like, is important, and it helps that teacher, the buy-in part, if you will. So it wasn't just a yes or a no, but they are expected to check it. And there's a question in our ticket submission where it says, "I have checked the dashboard," and we just link the dashboard right there. And the public-facing version is, that's critical. Here in Georgia, at least, we do get a lot of questions about the resources that we use. So, I feel like that's set us up, and helped us to be more proactive, with, being transparent. And it's not that difficult to use either, to put the list out there. Once you have that link, it's just that one link. And parents can bookmark it, or students or teachers. And it also helps us to just be clear in our communications, and helps us to by being able to get all the privacy policy updates. We're less likely to make mistakes. We still do, but it definitely helps with that part.
Great. We know it's so important for parents and community to have an understanding, there's an interest in what's being used and why. And so that sounds like a great process. Building on that transparency on the community level, talking about families, parent trust is huge. What are some of the ways that you support, other ways that you support parents and the public in understanding your sort of governance process?
So we host parent nights. Different schools will invite us in, and a lot of times we do it by feeder patterns. Maybe the high school has a big auditorium, uh, and they invite the 4 feeder elementaries and the 2 feeder middle schools, or however it's set up. But we like to pull this Lightspeed dashboard up, the public facing version, so they can see all the resources, and we show them how they can access that, from our FCBOE, our main website, so that we open up with that transparency right there. We have Data Privacy Week, and the whole country or world, has Data Privacy Week, so that's something we take advantage of, here. Coming up soon, actually. So what we do there is we're strategic about, like, each day, about what we send out. So all of our administrators will get something, and then teachers get something a little different. Students get something, even the little students will get something, even if it's like a handout, or something through their homeroom teacher. And then, of course, we send out information to our parents. So any of our parents who are in Infinite Campus, we can do an Infinite Campus blast of that communication. And it might be just a tip, like, "Hey, did you know that on your iPhone you can control your child's phone?" There's a lot of parent settings in there, and parents don't know this. That Apple doesn't do commercials about, like, that part of it. And that part's so important for us, because at the end of the day, we're concerned about the whole student, not just while they're here at school. So we try to help parents out with those. I'll say the personal devices, but we don't manage them or anything. We just offer tips and suggestions, if you will. So yeah, Parent Square and Infinite Campus, though, are big updaters. Like I said, the digital insights, the public version of that, they have access to. And I also feel like, it helps build a lot of confidence around our whole philosophy of student safety. The parent, they often see like the doors are locked at the school when they get there, and that's by design. But we also want them to understand that we're also making sure that they're safe digitally too, because we do have a lot of Chromebooks and we're one to one in some grade levels. But we want the parents to feel good about that, and definitely the students as well.
Thanks for sharing about that process, Matt.
Yeah.
Um, so, when thinking about data privacy, it's not just about security and compliance. These things impact budget decisions. So wondering what impact has your process had on tech spending and ROI of your ed tech purchases?
So yeah, on the insights dashboard, I'm able to go in, or and any administrator is able to go in and filter by an application or a resource. You're able to see the schools that have used that resource, the grade level. You can even get down to the teacher level, and then even to the student level. We look at it to get a picture of screen time, but remember that screen time is way more than just time. It's also like, what are the students actually doing? But we do get a little sense of that here. We've seen a couple of applications and resources that were not being used whatsoever. And 2 years ago, we actually saved $140,000 by getting rid of a resource that was only being used 30, 40 times a year in several different schools. It definitely wasn't worth $140,000 if that's all it was being used for. Um, but sometimes we can redo contracts and renegotiate based on the data that we have. So, by saving that much money, it paid for a lot of other things, right? So a lot of times sorry about the notification. A lot of times as we go back through, the applications that have been paid for, we realize that because when you first put all your resources there, you've got to understand that you've already purchased resources and you may not have used the privacy policy, the vetting part of that. So, there's definitely like, you got to navigate that carefully, and, sometimes work with the vendor directly and say, hey, we need, X, Y, or Z done. And sometimes, renegotiate contracts again or whatever. So I feel like the return on our investment is really good, and we've probably made more back than we've had to spend so far. So, and it helps us with compliance. The House Bill 351 here in Georgia, we're able to show, here's some of the resources that we've been using, with our families, and we even now have, quantifiable information that we can share if that is ever requested. So.
Great. So as part of the process of vetting apps, it sounds like looking into that usage and has helped align, usage with actual behavior in class. And so, in that sense, it's helped with ROI, and also in terms of vetting apps for compliance. Those that are not compliance could be cut, and you know, those that fail to meet privacy standards are kind of both wins of the process that your district has put together.
That's right. That's right.
Wonderful. All right, that wraps up our conversation with Matt. I hope you found what he shared insightful and valuable. And thank you to our partners at One Ed Tech for collaborating on the original webinar. And thanks to you for tuning in today. We'll see you next time on the Lightning Chat series.